I want to make sure, can you hear me back there? We will vote to recommend granting or denying each application for variation based on whether the application meets the standards of review set forth in section 5.4.f of our village ordinance. Applications for special use will be considered based upon whether the standards of review set forth in section 5.3.e of our village ordinance are met. The Village Board of Trustees will consider the recommendations we make this evening at their next regularly scheduled meeting on September 10th. Our recommendations to the board are advisory only. The Village Board has a final say on all applications and will make its own determination as to whether to grant or deny them. The Village Board is not legally bound by our recommendation. There is one small exception to this rule. If this board makes a negative recommendation with respect to an application, in order for the Village Board of Trustees to approve that application, a supermajority of 5 village board members must vote to approve it, rather than a simple majority of 4. There's one other small peculiarity to our proceedings of which you should be aware. The board does not operate by majority vote, this board. We operate instead by a tyranny of 4. In other words, no matter how many board members are present, and today there's 6 of us present, we need at least 4 positive votes to approve an application. Ordinarily, we have 7 members. Tonight we have only 6. Ms. Roberts, as Assistant Director of Community Development, sits with us tonight in an advisory capacity only and is not a voting member of the board. Please be aware that, therefore, that a vote of 3-3 in favor of an application will technically go into the record as a negative recommendation with the legal effect that I have previously described. In recognition of this unusual feature of our procedure, when we do not have all members of the board present on a given evening, we give the applicants who are scheduled to come before us tonight the option of requesting a continuance to the next available date on our schedule. The next available date for any applicant who would like to request a continuance this evening is September 4th. There's no penalty for asking for a continuance. No such request will be held against you when your case is eventually heard. If you wish to ask for a continuance, however, you must do so at the beginning of your presentation before making any substantive arguments as to the merits of your case. Please also be aware that if you request a continuance, there's no guarantee as to how many board members will be present on the evening to which your case is continued. The case we shall hear this evening will be heard. There is only one, so there's no order in which we hear them. When your case is called, please proceed to the podium, state your name and address, and tell us exactly why your application meets the standards of review that are applicable to it. Each member of this board is a longtime resident of the village and has visited your property during the past week. In addition, we have received village staff these green booklets containing all the written information that you have submitted in support of your application, as well as any other correspondence that the village has received. Accordingly, it is not necessary that you repeat what you have already stated in writing. Please just hit the high points with particular attention to why you believe your application meets the standard of review. After the applicant has a chance to speak, we will open the podium to others who wish to speak either for or against the application. Everyone will be permitted to have their say, though we would ask that you keep your comments as short and to the point as possible. After we have heard all oral presentations, I will close the evidence, and the members of the board will discuss what they have heard and take a vote. Once the evidence is closed, no further testimony on the application may be offered. The only people entitled to speak during that part of the proceedings will be members of the board. This meeting is a legal proceeding, and all testimony tonight must be given under oath. If you are here and planning to testify tonight, I would ask you to raise your right hand to give and be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth in the testimony that you are about to give? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Ms. Roberts, let's call the case.
Our case tonight is 2019 Z28 2904 Old Glenview Road. This is a request for an expansion of a special use for a place of worship to permit the operation of a child daycare center.
Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Barry Ash. I'm an attorney representing the petitioner tonight, the Chabad of Wilmette. And as Lisa just stated, our request is for the petitioner to operate a child daycare center within the existing place of worship. And the reason why we are required to be here is the house of worship was approved by the Board of Trustees on a recommendation by the Zoning Board of Appeals by Ordinance 2011-0-08 on 12/13/11. And at that time, a house of worship was approved. A daycare facility or a child care facility is a permitted use within a house of worship, but it wasn't presented at that time. There wasn't really at that time a need for it. There are plenty of classrooms that are existing within the within the house of worship that is being used by people who attend Sunday school. So the synagogue saw a need for a child care facility to be used here because there is plenty of classrooms. So at that time when the house of worship was approved, there was a number of variations, and those variations are going to have to be approved again because we are expanding the special use. I know there's also a parking concern, and then there's also concern on pickup and drop-off of the children. We do have evidence which was submitted to the village that Weinstein is permitting the parking of vehicles of the employees who are going to be used for the use requested to be able to use that parking lot, and also parents who are dropping off and picking up are also able to use their facilities. And it is a 5-year license agreement that was submitted. Also, the Village of Wilmette engaged a Kimley Horn, which the petitioner, of course, is approved. I mean, they were given a selection, and they engaged Kimley Horn to do a traffic study and to discuss the issues with the parking concerns and also with possible pedestrian movements after they park their car to be able to safely drop off and pick up the children. So they're here to answer any questions that you may have. I also have the two rabbis from the Chabad House to be able to also answer any questions that you have. I also did submit findings setting forth the approval standards for the special use, and I did submit that to the village, and that's in your paperwork also. So we're here to answer any questions that you have and then concerned citizens may have on this application.
Can I ask, I wasn't here when in 2011 when this was approved the first time. What was planned by including 5 classrooms? What was the intended use at that time?
Well, Sunday school, and I'm sure the rabbis will be able to better explain to me, it's just there is plenty of space within the house of worship, and it was just used for Sunday school because there are quite a few people who are here for praying and then also with their children to be able to participate in different activities that they have. But if you want to discuss or talk about those activities.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Moshe Teldin, and my wife Esther Leah heads up the Hebrew school on Sunday. We have a bunch of kids that attend from the community every Sunday from 9:30 till noon every Sunday, and then we also have some evening classes for teen clubs and additional programming as well throughout the week, but it's primarily used on Sunday.
And how many children are on Sunday?
About 75.
75?
Yeah.
And how old are they?
From 3 all the way till 13.
And the daycare is the purpose, the age of the children for the daycare is 2 to 5, I understand?
Yeah, 3 to 6.
Six.
Yeah. And that would be currently a preschool.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions for anyone in the for the applicant?
So far, what was discussed?
No, anything.
Do you have more to present, or are you ready to ask?
No, I'm
answer
here
some
to answer yes questions that you may have.
So the first one, I just want to confirm the different session times. So the way I understand it, at least from the Kimley Horn, is there three, just can you go over the drop-off pickups?
Yeah, there's a morning session and an afternoon session, so if you want to explain the sessions and the drop-off,
Yeah.
how you orchestrate all that.
So we have full day would be from 8:30 to 3 o'clock, and then there would be an option to pick up at 12 o'clock. So either you choose a full day from 8:30 to 3, or you have a half day till noon. And there's also an option for working parents to bring in early care and stay later up until 6 p.m. for aftercare. Obviously, we don't know 100% the spread of what the student body will look like until they sign up, but typically we assume in the industry about 50% choose to have pre-care and aftercare options, and then also half day or full day is also a similar type of spread. But that's, again, we don't know until they sign up.
Okay. So 7:30 to 9, 9 o'clock, 12, 3, and then 3 to 6? Is that?
Yeah.
So I'm taking
The outside activity would take place, yeah.
Okay, so I'm taking, what I'm trying to understand is, maybe you can help me wrap my head around the parking licensing agreement with the funeral home across the street.
Okay.
From the language, it says there's 2 different times that they'll allow parking.
Correct.
And I'm seeing 4 or 5 different, like, segments that people might get picked up and dropped off.
So, as I understood the traffic study, during the only need that we would need, we have 9 spaces in our lot. The only time that we would need the overflow parking across the street, the primary place of parking would be our lot, which is the 9 spots. There's 1 handicap and 8 additional spots. We would only need overflow at those at drop-off and pickup in the morning and afternoon. The early care is 1 or 2 people coming at a time. You know, 1 family might come, 2 families might come at 7 o'clock. Another family might come at 8 o'clock. So it's more staggered. So there's no rush. The 2 rush times is at those 2 times.
So these 2 times would be considered rush times or peak times?
Peak times, yeah.
What about the 3 to 6 day part?
So similarly, that would not be a rush, because there would maybe be a handful of students remaining in the center, and that's for the aftercare program. There would be no rush, and our parking lot would be able to accommodate those parking. So there'd be no need to rely on Weinstein.
Okay.
And if you have questions about the actual...
Does anybody else have any questions on
Just have
parking?
one kind of general
Yeah.
question. So when they say they're going to share Weinstein's going to share the lot, they'll park in the lot and then walk their children across the street?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, if you looked at the... you could elaborate on... Yeah. So I'll
simplify it a little bit.
Okay.
So there's
I think the people in
Yeah,
the audience
so,
need to know.
my name is Peter Lemon with Kimley Horn, and we conducted the parking and pickup and drop off analysis for this. So if you can imagine, the first part is it's kind of like a rolling start. The school starts at say 8:30 or 9 o'clock. People are able to come earlier if they want, but by the time you get to 8:30 or 9, everyone is there for the morning session. At noon, if you're not participating in the full day, you would then get picked up. And so there's a period of time where some people will come and pick up their children, and that should be able to be accommodated within the on-site parking lot. Initially, there's and maybe you can explain this further if need be, but there's 1 room for preschool classes, and eventually there could be 2 rooms if the demand grows to that point. in terms of enrollment.
Which would be the long-term student enrollment,
Exactly.
not the initial.
So with the initial one, with just 16 students, they can handle pretty much everything within the parking lot, except we suggested that staff, the 3 staff that would be there for that component, park across the street. So parents wouldn't have to park across the street until they go to a second room, in which case they might find that the on-site lot at noon may not be able to handle the people that are there to pick up at one time. So they might need to overflow across the street. And so we've identified kind of a stair-stepped level of recommendations, one
Right.
for the 1 classroom, and if they do grow to 2, there's the recommendation regarding the crosswalk, because we would be having students, parents and students walking across the street.
Okay.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
Are all the children brought into the facility? There's not a drop-off line at all?
Correct. They're
Okay.
brought in, and I believe they sign in and sign out. It's,
Okay.
yeah, part of the logistics of that. They can't just have them walk in, right?
I
I
have a
thought
question.
maybe if they were 6, maybe they tried to. That's good to hear.
A question, did you include, I understand there is an adult class during the day, or more than one. Is that still going on, and did you include that?
Only in our current programming of our existing facility, the only conflict with the preschool, during the preschool hours, the only other activity that might go on is 3 times a year we have a Wednesday morning for an hour and a half, 10:30 to 10 to 11:30 in the morning. And I believe in our discussion we recommended that if that was the case, then we would, understand. But that's the only conflict that exists in our current programming.
And that class would, if I read this correctly, would be every Wednesday for a number
It's
of
3
weeks.
times a year.
One Wednesday?
No, there's a ongoing 6 weeks a
6 weeks.
series.
Okay.
So 3 times. So yeah, in
And
total 18
What
weeks.
is the attendance expected?
Maybe 10 to 15 adults during that time. Some of them couples, I would say. Yeah.
And I presume they would drive there and park either on the street or in parking lot A.
So typically, some of them. You wanna step? Either in our lot, and if that doesn't allow, in Weinstein is how people have been accommodated.
So, did you say from 10 to 11:30?
Yeah.
Is that roughly the time
Yeah.
frame?
10 to
So
11:30.
at that point, you would not expect any parents to be still hanging
No,
around?
that smack actually fits perfectly smack in the middle of.
So would you expect the on-site parking lot to be empty at that point?
There should be no preschool activity on a Wednesday morning at 10:30, at 10 o'clock. The next activity would be at noon when they come for the pickup. Obviously, a few minutes before noon, a few minutes, and that's only the kids that come for the half-day program.
Thank you, Adams. If you want to continue?
Oh, I got a couple more, actually.
Thank you.
It says a day in February. What day was that? That the traffic study
The
was
actual date
conducted?
of observations. So what we did was we didn't do, traffic counts at the intersections. We did observations to understand what the characteristics were. And, qualitatively, is the street busy? Are people walking across the street at Thalen and Old Glenview Road, things of that nature? It was a weekday. Let me see if I have the specific date. I don't know if I have a specific date. Typically, what we do is we focus on like Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, because Mondays and Fridays
Right.
tend to be sometimes, a little different. People might have off and things like that. Let's see if I have, I don't know if I have the specific
use-
day of the week, though.
Yeah, you said a weekday in February.
Yeah, we typically focus on Tuesday, Wednesdays, or Thursdays.
Okay, over multiple days, or just single
One day, a typical day. Yeah, we usually kind of coordinate either with staff as well as the applicant to make
But it
sure.
wasn't
it was
if it's weather permitting, right? So
Right.
If
I mean,
it's a
yeah, you
blizzard.
want to do it in a blizzard. You don't want to do it on, days where there's like elections or other things where people aren't following the normal,
But since the school is not in, has not, the
Right.
daycare is not in operation yet, you had to kind of
Well, this was
impute,
just to understand
make
what,
assumptions,
yeah,
right?
what's the current condition like, right? And then in terms of the in terms of the, the volume of people picking up and dropping off, it was based on the enrollment. And then we got information, we talked earlier about like the spread of who participates in half-day versus full-day, who participates in early care versus late care. We made some assumptions, but we're also got some information from Kira Valley School in Evanston just to understand what portion of their students are, early and late. And also, we didn't apply any kind of assumption for students that might be siblings and coming in the same car. We assumed it was all one student, one car kind of thing. So in that sense, it's kind of a conservative approach. Whereas I would expect you may have siblings or friends that are carpooling too. So we didn't account for anything like that.
Can I ask you, interject and just ask a quick question? Because you mentioned that you used Caravali, which is in Evanston, some miles away.
Right.
And Beth Hillel, which is a synagogue that's less than a mile away. Did you approach them? Why didn't you use them as to compare?
I think it was just somewhat, if you want to expand on that.
It would seem like they would be much more accurate representation.
Right. We have a contact at Caravali and also their Montessori school and the preschool that we have. So it was just the convenience of why we reached out to them. Yeah. Yeah, our preschool is a Montessori school, so
Very good.
and that's why that was the comparison.
All right, one more.
Yep.
All right, so page...
Front row, right?
Yeah, page 6 of your traffic study.
Sure.
Just speak to this. At the bottom, it says, as shown above, projected peak parking demand is expected to exceed the parking supply currently provided on site and within Zone A of the funeral home lot. Expansion of the shared parking agreement with the funeral home to be included in portion of Zone B may be required to meet peak demand.
Is that in the? I'm trying to think where that is. Oh, okay,
It's
that's
page
for the long term
Right,
program.
right.
So you can see along, and if you follow along, there's other ways to do it. You could also accommodate it on street if you wanted. So if you were to look at the peak parking demand, which is the 12 o'clock, the half day kind of
Right.
transition, that's when you have, assuming all of the students are getting picked up, all the cars are there at the same time. You have, at that point, you'd have the 5 staff, which would be parking across anyway. So you'd have 15 of that 20. You'd have 15 that are related to student pickup and retrieval. And so that would be, if you say you only use the regular spaces within the lot, not the handicap space, so that's 8. So you'd have 7 more. And so we identified the funeral home lot as an option, or for the overflow part, if that was to be the case.
How many spaces are in Lot A in the funeral home?
I believe it's, I'd have to look, I want to say 16 or more. This is really just the northern portion of the lot. There's 16 spaces, 13 standard and 3 ADA accessible on the west side of the property. And Lot B is 72.
Do we have a map showing their parking lot and these A and B areas?
It's Exhibit 1 of the study,
Yeah.
so you can see this section to the north is Zone A. And you can see the parking lot itself across the street in the southwest.
You also recommend that a crossing be designated directly from Lot A to the entrance, to the driveway entrance to the
Correct.
school.
In the long-term plan, if they were to need to park over there with parents that are picking up and dropping off. In the one classroom, the initial plan, we didn't feel that was necessary because the on-site parking lot would be handling the pickup and drop-off. We identified...
Is there currently a striped cross?
There is not.
Pedestrian crossing anywhere in that intersection?
Only on the north side of the intersection, across Thielen.
I see.
And it's just 2 parallel stripes.
It would not be difficult to, would it be to ask the village to do a designated crosswalk with those signs that say stop when pedestrians are present?
We can ask.
and, you know,
Yep.
in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, that's what the recommendation is in the phase two, if they were to go to 2 classrooms. And you can see, we looked at 2 different alternatives. It's really the striping, the signs as you just referred to, and then, you know, ADA accessible ramps at the ends of the crosswalk.
I have a question now for the
I have
applicant.
one more for
Go ahead,
Peter.
sorry.
Yep.
Sorry. So what do you think the impact will be on the neighbors with this?
Right, so when you look at this, and especially when you look at the kind of the rolling start, and then you have the start at say 9 o'clock, and then you have the midday pickup. So we originally had you know, looked at options where we were mistaken. We thought there was also a half-day option in the afternoon. That's not the case. And so we had to go back and revise this, and it's even less impact than we initially thought, because you're just picking up. You don't have people also arriving to drop off for an afternoon. A lot of preschools, you tend to have people kind of also dropping off in the afternoon. It's that overlap. So you don't have that overlap issue. You basically have people at different times filtering out and spreading the load in the morning, and then picking up in the middle of the day, and then again at the 3 to 6. So in the middle of the day at noon, there's not a whole lot of other traffic going on. And by the time you pick up after 3 o'clock, that 3 to 6, you're not even really overlapping with people's normal commute times at all. And so you're really starting to filter the parents that are using the extended time. And at that point, you're down to just, 4 to 5, students that are still left to be picked up. So from a traffic impact, we worked with staff. We didn't think that was a considerable impact. We were sensitive to, the parking situation. We really wanted to make sure that the parking could be handled on site, and if not on site, the preference was, something across the street. We know that, we don't want to be directing people to park on Thalen Court, for example. We know that we don't want, it's a dead-end street. You don't want people driving in, driving out, and circulating around. And so that's why we have kind of the 2-step, if the one classroom is successful and they grow to 2 classrooms, that's why we recommended the direction for overflow parking to be across the street.
Now, what happens if there's a funeral? How does that impact the
Sure.
parking?
Well, even with the overflow parking, as I mentioned, we're talking about seven more cars. If they do have a service across the street that is going to use the whole lot, and that's something that overlaps with the pickup time for the preschool, I think we could work out an arrangement for how to, for those kinds of events, on how to handle that. There is, capacity to park on Old Glenview Road to the west if need be for, that kind of event, but it doesn't seem like that's a common occurrence where they're going to need that. But I think that's something that should be
Can you
thought
explain
about.
to me your
Thank you.
numbers? I didn't understand the 7 you just mentioned. They
Sure.
would only need 7 more spaces?
Sure.
It
So
seemed like peak demand the total parking demand is about 20.
is about 20 at the peak, right?
And 19 in the beginning of the day. So if there was, and I don't know when when services are scheduled, or if there are visitations or anything like that, but especially if one of the parking spaces is taken up with the Sukkot booth, then we're down to 8 spaces. And
Right.
we're definitely parking people on the street.
Right. Yeah, you could be on those events. You would probably be parking people on the street for, the 5 minutes when they go to pick up and drop off. We know that we estimated there's about 11 spaces along the north side of Old Glenview Road going west of Thalen. So that would maybe be the backup option if they had a service that conflicted with. So if you had the 20, you've got 5 staff, you've got, say, 8 on site that aren't
I see,
handicapped
that's how you go.
spaces.
Okay.
And so then that's where you're down to the 7 or so spaces that are left.
Okay. It seems like there are parking options available.
Right.
Traffic, especially getting in and out of the parking lot, since there's one means of access to it, that seems a little bit more problematic.
Yeah, so one of the other recommendations that we had was, again, in the phase 2, where we thought you might actually be filling up the parking lot and you might want to use overflow. Right now, there's a sign on a light post. It's there. It tells you that you shouldn't, that there's overflow parking. But we didn't think that was super visible, so we wanted to have, during those pickup and drop-off periods in phase 2, when we might use overflow parking, is to have a staff member out there monitoring the parking lot when it's full. Go ahead and direct people to park across the street rather than try to pull into the lot and look for a space out of 8 that might be available. So
Is that acceptable to, yeah?
Phase 2 to have a staff member present
Yeah.
under his recommendation
Okay.
during the peak hour.
Yeah, we would agree that that would be a condition moving forward, to have a staff person present outside.
Do you have any idea, or maybe the applicant does, how many funeral services are there during a typical week? Per week?
Someone asked earlier also, funerals start about 9:30, and I would say the majority of them are morning services. So by 3 o'clock, by the next peak time, I would say most of them are during that time. They have services often. I would say the ones that really fill up, like you saw, there's 90 spots in their parking lot or so. So the ones that fill up their lots, it doesn't happen very often, and it does happen. And at those times, I don't know, I would say a handful of times a year that maybe one a month, if I'm being really generous, that it fills up so that people are parking outside of their lot.
During those events, does Lot A fill up first before?
Actually, Lot A fills up last because people are entering from Skokie Boulevard. This is really like the last spots that those people, it's not near the front door, it's near the back garage entrance, so no one really parks there until everything else is full.
Next question I had about the playground that you plan
Yes.
on that large piece of land in front. What do you intend to do there?
So we're just it's actually not a playground anymore. We decided because of the limited space, it's just going to be enclosed space. There's going to be
Fence around it?
Yeah.
And have some soft...
balls and tricycles and things like that. Again, these are little kids, so they don't need a lot. There's not going to be any equipment that'll be built there. And this is the fence is there for the state necessitates us putting up the fence there. It'll be a 4-foot 50-50 fence that'll match the layout of the front yard. So we're calling it a play lot now instead of a playground. Yeah.
Wondering how many children it can hold at any one time.
Do you want to know? To DCFS, so they asked for 75 square feet per child, and it'll be able to hold 9 children, which is the class size that we'd be bringing out at one time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I just wanted a clarification that, is it a daycare center or is it a Montessori that you're opening?
It's a Montessori preschool, and as I understand, the legal term for it is a daycare.
A daycare,
Yeah,
okay.
but it's a Montessori preschool.
Okay.
The early care and aftercare, I think, is more what we would call daycare. There's no religious, no teaching or anything during those periods of time, so that would be more of a daycare. But I think the term is daycare.
Any other comments?
Oh, I had a question for, and Lisa, you might be best suited to address this. So if the application is granted, the variance is granted, and it seems like there, some way or another, most of the time there would be adequate parking. My concern is really more about the traffic flow, with people crossing the street, people trying to get in and out of the parking lot, and the crosswalk is right there, as well as residents who are occasionally wanting to exit Thielen Court or go up and down the street. If there are traffic problems, then what? And I say this, I live right across the alley from St. Augustine's, where the Rose Hall Montessori School is. And I have to wait several times a day to get out of my driveway, my garage, because there's a line of cars waiting to pick up. And I understand that would be different. You guys aren't going to have a carpool line, so that's not an issue. But there still would be a fair amount of traffic in a very small area. And so I was wondering about that. You have any?
Complaints would probably go to the engineering department, and they would look into it. If the applicant isn't meeting, what they said they would do, that's obviously something we can act on. If it's something that they're complying with what they were told to do, but it's not working, then we might have to dig deeper with the applicant and try to find some other solution.
Because I'm certain that, the letters that were, or the sample letters that were included, pick up and drop off procedure acknowledgement and agreement, it's very nice. I don't know whether people will pay any attention to it. My experience is that signs and letters and training and all that kind of stuff are good until it rains or snows or somebody is late or the nanny gets sent instead of the parent or the grandparent or something like that. And they may not know, they may not care. So I just see a potential problem there. And I don't have any good solution for it, and I didn't know how the village would handle it. Sure.
According to DCFS procedure, the parent must sign the child in and sign them out. So they're, as far as dropping off at the curb, we won't be allowed to do that. I mean, it's not something that we'll be able to accommodate. And again, the kids are little, and we insist from a safety perspective also. And also part of the Montessori, as I understand, is the parents handing off the kid to the teacher, and it's sort of like part of starting your day. So I'm not answering all your questions, but specifically about
Rose Hall, they have somebody out there who gives the parent something to sign.
Oh, really? There's tricks. I didn't even know that trick. But yeah, so that's something that we're setting up as policy, that we're trying to have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Before you go, and I'm sure we'll hear from the neighbors,
Yes.
but you've been there, how long have you been?
On the site, coming up on 6 years.
Yeah, that long. So I'm thinking of Thalen Court. Have you had any complaints?
I believe so. Yeah.
And have you continued to tell your your staff, as well as the people that attend your events, have you told them not to park on Thalen Court?
I submitted something. Every program that we do have. So our staff don't park on Thelen, but every program that we do have, part of the automated registration confirmation includes a line. I don't know if you saw it, but that's the papers that I brought up earlier. Can I hand this up? Yeah.
Sure.
Pull out the little drawer on
What
the
do you
side
think? Yeah, you
there.
can.
Yeah. And there's an overhead.
It's our very high tech.
So I have, let me just highlight it. So this is 2015.
Excuse me, can you define what this is, please?
These are just samples of communication that we have that regularly goes out to every program that we have, encouraging whoever signs up to the program not to park on Thelen Court. So that first one was 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018, and that's in communication with the ongoing program that takes place, and also with the regular adult education classes that take place. Part of their the process, when they sign up, they get a notice in respect of the neighbors to avoid parking on Thelen and to park at Weinstein's, as our agreement has.
How's it working?
I would say overall it is working.
Okay, well, we'll probably
I'm sure we'll hear.
we'll hear from the neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions or comments for the applicant? Would somebody else like to make a comment?
Good evening. My name is Rabbi David Flinkenstein. I'm the rabbi at Chabad of Wilmette. And first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here and hearing us out this evening. We've been here in Wilmette, we've been here for 27 years. At the location, we've been here for 25 years, and we've had our building up close to 6 years already. And we've had this agreement with Weinstein from the get-go, from when we were in the storefront until when we were in the building. At the junction when we came before the zoning committee for the building, there was a lot of concern about that as we were transitioning from a storefront into a building, what would then happen, and so on. I think the track record is that over the past years that we've been in the building, we've had many programs, larger programs, and as Rabbi Teldin mentioned, every communication that we have for people who are attending programs, we urge them, please be respectful of the neighbors and do not park on Thielen Court. And encouraging everyone that at the largesse of Weinstein Funeral Homes, that they've made their lot available to us. Please make use of their lot. And it really works out amazingly over the course of the years that whenever we have the programs, it really overlaps whenever they're in use. Rarely have we had any kind of an event that would be in conflict with a funeral. Maybe it's divine intervention. With a funeral, and certainly not for a larger funeral that they've had. But this has been overall our experience. And on the general theme, although we're applying for a daycare, technically as it is called, but we're looking to open a Montessori preschool, and the reason for this is education is paramount. And what's most important is, especially in the youngest of ages, to instill within the children morals and values. That is something which is so lacking today. And even though we're talking about 15, 16 children, what difference would it make? Well, for that child, it will make a difference. And for that family, it will make a difference. And that's what we're looking to instill within children morals and values in a Montessori-style learning session to be able to develop within our parameters, our area. So,
Thank you. I think we've heard from the applicant, and I will now open it to folks who want to speak either for or either in support or not in support of this request for a variation. So let's start with those that would like to speak for. Anybody? Would like to speak in support of this application? Please come up and identify yourself.
Hi. Hi.
Good evening.
My name is Jen Marzouk. I live on Marion, 2625 Marion Lane. I've lived in Wilmette since the month I started kindergarten at Ramona. And if it's okay, I'd also like to, my parents who live on Brookside Drive also would like to say that they support what I'm saying, but they are with their 2-day-old grandson. So they'd like to be here also to support this. A rabbi and his wife are first and foremost teachers. And this is the most perfect way that the Teldins and the Flinkensteins could be described. All 3 of my children attend the Wilmette Community Hebrew School at the Chabad, which they founded and where they all teach. My husband and I are utterly amazed by what they do each and every week. Each of our children learns so differently, yet each week the teachers at Chabad meet each of them at their own level with tireless passion and cheer. What an asset that this spirit can infuse the first years of a child's life. There's no question in my mind that this preschool program at the Wilmette Chabad will meet the highest standards. It is my sincerest hope and that of my family that these plans are allowed to move forward. Thank you for your time.
What was your address again?
2625 Marion.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Thank you for hearing me out. My name is Morton Friedman. I'm a 50-year resident of Wilmette. I attend Chabad of Wilmette. I'm a member of the congregation. While I am here in support of it, I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of either of my rabbis, or have I told them what I'm going to say. I would simply suggest to you that this application stands on a very different footing than a commercial daycare center. While this is a house of worship, no house of worship, be it Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, confines itself simply to praying to God. An essential part of the religious function is the education, not just of adults, but of children. It is the education of children that provides the next generation of adherents. And I would simply suggest on that basis that it is entitled to that consideration. So I thank you for hearing me out and being here today.
Thank you for coming. If there's no one else going to speak in support of this application, one more, please.
Good evening. My name's Joel Feldman. My wife Ellen and I have lived at 2142 Sandy Lane in Wilmette for approximately 35 years. I need to disclose that I'm in the litigation department of Sidley Austin in downtown Chicago. I've been a partner in the litigation department until a few months ago when I took senior status as I ease into retirement. Critical to explain that I'm here as a private citizen, nothing to do with my profession as a litigator. My wife Ellen and I belong to two synagogues. We've belonged to Beth Hillel for approximately 35 years and Chabad of Wilmette for approximately 15 years. Both synagogues that we affiliate with, I think, are superb institutions, but I'm here tonight to vouch for Chabad of Wilmette. We're very active in Chabad of Wilmette. We interact with the rabbis and their families more than once a week, given the classes that we go to and services that we attend. And I can tell you from personal experience that the Chabad rabbis and their families are outstanding examples of righteous living, ethical standards, and proper behavior. Their goal, in my judgment, is to instill in adults and children exactly that: righteous living, ethical standards, and proper behavior. I make two quick points in favor of the application. First, a preschool contributes significantly to the health of any church or synagogue. It's critical to have young children involved in houses of worship. It creates vibrancy, it adds life, and parents often affiliate where their children go. So a preschool will contribute to the health of Chabad of Wilmette, which I submit is an important institution for this community. The second point is a point that I think is often overlooked regarding the benefits of a preschool, and those are the benefits to the community at large. The National Education Association, which is the largest education association in the United States, approximately 3 million members, it wrote an article about the benefits of preschool to a community. And this is what the National Education Association says. I have the article if you want it. Studies find that well-focused investments in early childhood development yield high public as well as private returns. Researchers found that school districts can expect to save more than $11,000 per child because participants are less likely to require special or remedial education. The Urban Child Institute, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates in favor of children, it's centered in Nashville. They have an article entitled "Investments in Early Childhood Benefit Our Entire Community." And that says, in part, a large body of research shows that early education programs have spillover effects that benefit taxpayers by addressing children's problems early in life rather than later, when solutions are more expensive and less effective. Children who attend high-quality preschool programs are less likely to need special education, to be arrested, or to require social services. They tend to be healthier, earn higher incomes, and pay more taxes. So I don't think we should, or I don't think you are, but I want to remind this esteemed panel that there's a benefit to the community at large from having preschool education. I want to end with yet another often overlooked benefit that's not covered in these articles, and it stems from personal experience. Namely, preschool students often identify with their village and come back to serve. And the best example I can give is our daughter, Rebecca. She was schooled all the way through from K through 8 at the Wilmette Public Schools, went to New Trier, off to Carleton College and Vanderbilt for graduate school, and came back to Wilmette and taught as a special education teacher in the Wilmette system for a period of time. For reasons unrelated to this event tonight, she now teaches next door as a special ed teacher in Northfield. But the point is that special education breeds identity to a particular area because it usually has a positive experience. And quite often, these persons will come back and serve their community. So I want to thank you for your time and service to the community, and I want to thank this zoning board for creating such a welcoming environment for houses of worship in our great village of Wilmette, Illinois. Good evening.
Thank you. Just an aside, I don't think anyone up here is opposed to early childhood education. I think we all agree that it's of great benefit.
Understood. Thank you.
I agree with you on that. Okay, having heard, I think, from everyone who is in favor of this application, we'll now go to those that are not in favor of this application. I remind you that if you want to speak, make sure I've sworn you in, because if you testify, you need to be sworn in. So please, those that are not in favor, please come up.
Hi, Richard Monahan. I live at 142 Thillen Court. I'll make this.
Can you tell, we're going to look at the map. Can you tell us quickly where that is?
It's on the east side of the street, 2 houses down from the synagogue.
Got it.
Okay? We're not here to discuss the benefit to the school. We're here to discuss whether the variance is in keeping with the neighborhood. You state in your own guide, the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood and will be consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies set forth in the comprehensive plan. I have no idea what those goals and policies are, but I doubt very seriously that they involve putting a 16,000 square foot synagogue in a residential neighborhood on the postage stamp side of a lot that required 18 variances. 5 years later, we come back for 2 more variances because, from what I can understand, when the lawyer came up and talked about putting in the school that they had lots of classrooms. Is there a need, or is we trying to fill an underutilized building that wasn't planned for? If the school, and everything that has been said about schools here, I believe, these aren't new notions. Why wasn't this addressed 5 years ago? I do not understand why it's coming up now. This is not suitable for the neighborhood. There is no ingress and egress out for a drop-off zone. We're not talking about long-term parking. You hit it right on the head. You know what a headache it is, particularly in bad. Parents aren't going to walk long distances to park a car to drop the child off for 2 minutes. They're going to drop where it's convenient, rush in, and rush out. That street is not built for it. You're built next to a dead-end street with 32 homes on it, where people are coming in and out constantly, going to work, shopping, or whatever. I've got to admit, one other point, I am totally confused on the numbers here that are being used and tossed around, and the amount of spaces that are being required. You're going on assumptions that nobody even knows will happen. The point of fact is that if you cared about the character of the neighborhood, if you cared about the people in that neighborhood, if you cared about the residencies on a modest street, you would not have done what you did in the beginning, and you wouldn't continue not just keeping in the character of the neighborhood, but how much more do you want to degrade the neighborhood? Thank you. It shouldn't be approved.
I got a quick question. Sir, just
Yes.
super quick. Do you ever have any issues with parking on Thalen Court with the way the...
Yes, I do. And I will admit, I will say, you have tried and made an attempt to present and head off those problems. The fact is, you can't force people not to park on a public street. I understand that.
So what, just out of curiosity, just a quick description of what type of congestion do you see?
Well, on Saturdays in particular, between people visiting and people that will use Thalen Court that also have access to the synagogue, they will park. We only have one side of the street for parking. It's a narrow street, so that usually on Saturdays is pretty much taken up. And you do have trouble getting in and out. And when you have two cars coming down, you have a car coming in and a car trying to get out, and a whole street lined with parked cars, it's a headache. And I tell you, it's not the safest street in the world. I've complained to people on the street, sometimes they use it like, it's like a racetrack going down to the end of the turnaround. There are some children that will use the synagogue sidewalk for skateboarding, and I don't have a problem with that. They're more than welcome to. The teenagers are very polite, but I've gone up to them and I've told them, I said, I want to remind you of one thing. You're almost at the top of the street where cars come out. You won't see them. You're coming down on a skateboard, shooting across the street. It's not a good situation. It's not a good situation to have young children in an area that is not built for it, coming and going at odd times of the day. It just isn't. And you can talk about the Weinstein Funeral Home. Nobody even knows whether that's going to be in business in a year from now or 2 years from now. They merged with another funeral home 2 years ago. As a matter of fact, and you want to talk about the business, they do 450 funerals a year. Now, granted, not all of them are full funerals that take place in the parking lot and require visiting hours. They do grade-sized services also. But I'll tell you, you come in on that street when that is in use and it's a full funeral, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare.
Okay.
You know, I just ask. There are reasons why we have zoning laws. There are reasons why people have variations, ask for a special use. And I would like you to keep in mind what was the intent and the purpose of why those zoning rules are there.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
My name is Sarah Fritz, and I live at 208 Thielen Court. Can you find me down there?
Yeah,
Okay.
on the east side of the street, right?
I'm on the east side of the street, yes, in the middle
A
of
few
the block.
houses down from the last gentleman.
Yeah, exactly, I think in the middle of the block. Okay, so I've been living in that street for 23 years, 20 of which, as a single mom, I did early morning pick up and drop off, and I've done it all over Wilmette, New Trier, et cetera. So I know what lines of early morning drop-off are. I know what stuff at the beaches and pretty much everywhere, and it's always trouble, whether you're somebody who's like heading off to work or just in the line with all the other mommies. It can be a lot of trouble. So one of the things that I don't think anybody's talked about here is that from the study, they only picked one day. So they didn't indicate when the bus is there at the top of the street. They didn't indicate the differences between when the Highcrest bus, the New Trier bus, or the difference between days when people have early sports stuff or other things like that, which really impacts the traffic on the street. So my job, I could be leaving as early as 7 or as late as 8:30. There's a significant amount of traffic there, but when you come up Thielen Court and you're looking at Old Glenview Road, pretty much every day, there's at least 7 cars parked along Old Glenview Road, so it is a blind corner. There's only one lane that comes this way. This is a very fast street because people want to get to Skokie Boulevard and turn left and right really fast, and sometimes the people who live in the apartments down at the very end that are in Skokie come zooming that way also in order to go north onto the highway, because Skokie Boulevard goes straight onto the highway.
Do you know, I also, when I was there, I saw some cars parked on the north side west of Thielen Court.
Yeah, they're always parked there.
But do you know who that is? Are those local residents?
Not always, no. Sometimes there are people who miss the parking lot on the little strip mall there, and then they park down there. During the weeks, in the evenings when you're coming home, the traffic going left onto the Old Glenview Road or the traffic going right onto Old Glenview Road is going really fast because they want to get through the light during between 3 and 6:30. very often you almost hit people. So, and in the morning, the same trouble. You come up, you're trying to turn left to get to Skokie Boulevard. I have had multiple near misses. My son has had 2 accidents, and even the policeman admitted that it's a blind corner. So the majority of the street is going east because you have a turn lane and a lane, and it literally at the top of Thielen Court goes from a 2 lanes plus parking down to 1 lane, and a turn lane. So everybody is like doing this jog, and they do it really fast. So I think the traffic situation there, putting a crosswalk there would be extraordinarily confusing, because the whole length of that is literally from the flag to that door. That's the length of the space between Skokie Boulevard and Thielen Court. It's not very big, and you have cars jostling to try to get in and out. So I think from my perspective, the traffic is a huge issue. I don't think that the traffic and the parking during the week is a problem at all. I think only when there are funerals, because then it's parked all the way down to the bottom of the street. But, for the most part, I think everybody has been, pretty much doing a good job with the parking and the pickup and drop off of what they have right now. Some people double park to pick up, like in the evening classes, but that's only a problem if somebody's coming, doing a fast turn from Skokie Boulevard and then almost, because you only have a little skinny lane. So I think I had something else, but I think most of my concern was from the traffic study. I don't think it was significant enough. I think it needs to be looked at a lot more. And the other thing about Thielen Court is it's used as a pass-through to the rec center, particularly for the skateboard park and for kids taking their bicycles down there. So you have a lot of traffic after school that goes down there, because at the end of the street, between 2 houses, there's actually a sidewalk that you can pass through onto Glenview Road.
So what do? They drop off children?
No, that's just kids going to the rec center.
On bicycles?
On bicycles or walking or skateboards. The skateboard park is right over there.
I got it.
So you get kid traffic, and they tend not to pay attention. And if there's a big uptick in traffic on Old Glenview Road, there's going to be I think there's going to be a lot of potential issues there.
2 things. One is that the measurement that we have from the corner of Skokie Boulevard to Thielen Court is 144 feet, 144.54. Just
144
for frame of reference. But would you say that your experience with the traffic is substantially different than what was presented in by the consultant?
You see this one car here? This is usually all the way past this picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so people double park right here, and you've literally got a driveway here and a driveway here, and this is maybe 3 things long. Well, you also have the place where Con Ed and Comcast and everybody else parks, because there's facilities here for lighting and utilities. So this little thing here gets a fair amount of traffic that you would not think it has.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Please.
Good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Barbara Ament, and I live at 138 Thielen Court. Directly, the first house parallel to the synagogue, the rear of the synagogue.
You're right to the north.
The
Adjacent.
very first house on the east side of the street.
Okay.
Okay, I have several things to bring up to you. First of all, I have been there. Next month will be 46 years that I am living in that house. And my neighbors who have joined me here this evening, we have all been on Thielen Court from anywhere from 37 to 49 years. That's a big history for our street in Wilmette. So we know every crack and every crevice in the street that there is. I have several points to make. Back when they were wanting to build this building back in 2011, the issue came up with Weinstein parking lot at the same time. And I did have a question, and you could very well go and review that tape from that time, is that I did question it at the time, that at that time, there was another funeral home, as our other gentleman noted to you, that had merged with Weinstein's. And at that very time, at that time that they were proposing to do this building, I had the comment of making that if, in the event that Weinstein's ever goes out of business, what will be their backup for parking? Now, at one time, Weinstein was not doing very well, and probably therefore that's their merger with another funeral home. Yes, they do have a very big parking lot. To be honest with you, as I said, I am living there for almost 46 years, and the funeral home has never presented a problem to us. Now, back in the days when they used to have funerals for a half hour, they were there, parked, and left. Now relatives begin to speak in honor of these people, in memory of these people, and therefore the funeral could go on for a little more than an hour or hour and 15 minutes. Then they're gone. They are gone. What we, the residents of Thielen Court, object to several things. First of all, there's a big traffic flow problem with this issue that they want to put the school in. It's, as you've heard, it's a parking only allowed on one side of the street, which is on the west side of the street. I have spoken to Mr. Manis several times, to John Adler. I've spoken to many of them. They know me from all these years of being in the village, and John Adler will tell you that I have very, very definite points of interest that should be addressed. Anyway, getting back to this traffic flow. Now, not only will there, if you are familiar with the street, it sounds like you have all reviewed it. And going west on Old Glenview Road, the lane narrows to a single lane. Going east, there is a turning lane and an eastbound, or else turning south onto Skokie Boulevard, or else turning north on Skokie Boulevard. So there is an issue with the parking, and on Saturdays, their people are not directed. My neighbors could verify that with you people, that these people, their congregants, are not parking in Weinstein's lot, which Weinstein does not hold funerals on Saturdays, and therefore there's plenty of parking available. They block off their parking lot so as no one could park in their parking lot because of the Sabbath, and I understand that. But their congregants do park on Thielen Court and make it very difficult for our 33, 34 homes on the block, or if we have company.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
Sorry. Who blocks off which parking lot on Saturdays?
The synagogue, on a holiday or on Sabbath. They don't allow people.
Okay.
Shouldn't be driving, but obviously they do, because if there's a need for parking in Weinstein's parking lot, every person is not walking from Highland Park, believe me. So that's one thing. And the issue is coming back to the hours. 7:30 in the morning, people are not abiding by that. I had children. My children have grown up. I've been in carpools for many years. And to say that a child is going to be dropped off exactly 7:30, how many cars, and they're going to drop them off before 7:15, probably. You mean to tell me they're going to not allow them to come in with these children? These people have to get to their employment, and then pickup times, 6 o'clock at night. people are coming home from work. We do have workers on our block and who are employed, and they have to come home. So that's another problem with traffic. So I hope that you will recognize that as well. And when they say they're going to have 30 children there, 7 to 16 per session, is the village going to enforce that? Or is there going to be somebody that's going to police it? I mean, how is it going to be managed? I mean, to just take their word of it, it's not going to suffice for us neighbors, because we have this big problem with the parking as it is on the one side of the street. And I have company in the evening or a holiday, whether it's Christmas time or Mother's Day or Father's Day or Labor Day or any other legal holiday. It's impossible, and if it falls on a weekend and if it's a holiday, and if they have the synagogue people parking on Thielen Court, my guests cannot park on everybody on my driveway. I have a long driveway. This is granted. And another point I want to make is, besides the drop-off and the pickup time, it doesn't, because it's got to be 3 or 4 times that people are entering or dropping off or coming to pick up. And I think you really have to really consider those times and take into consideration the number of homes that we have on the block, as well as the people who are employed who have to come and go at those hours as well. And another thing is coming back to their little sidewalk that's behind their building. And one of our neighbors mentioned to you that they do have skateboarding going on. Now, my driveway is directly next to there. I can't tell you how many kids are skateboarding because it's an incline, and it seems like a fun thing to do. But when they fall and they hit their head on my driveway, who's going to be responsible for this? I have spoken to Mr. Manis, and he suggested that a post be put up there so as to deter these kids from skateboarding over there. But the street, if you're familiar with the street, is an inclined street as it is. So, you know, it's a breeding ground for these kids to go skateboarding or riding dirt bikes or whatever they're going to do on it. And coming back to that play area. Now, in the letter states that they're going to have a fence 4 feet tall. How wide is it going to be? Because that parking lot is not, and the correction is that there are 10 spaces there, 10 parking spaces, with only 1 designated handicap space. 1. And I questioned this back in 2011 and 2010 of the number of spaces, and I have been, a couple of weeks ago, I saw 2 people that were dropped off, one in a wheelchair and one with a walker, elderly people, senior citizens. They had to drop them off, park their car in the middle of the street, and then they had to drop them off, and then they had to go park at Weinstein's to move their car. So as far as, where am I here? That 4 feet tall screened-in area or boarded up or whatever they're going to do with that, how wide is it going to be? I didn't see that in the literature here, nor did I hear it mentioned tonight either. So that's another thing, and I believe that there are, I don't know whether it's a DCFS that puts this up or what, that they have to have 35 square feet for a child accessible child to be in, and 75 feet for, it's another something, you could look into it. It's some kind of, I don't know what it is, but it's 75 square feet, depending upon the children. So, and that's 10.5 hours we're talking about, from 7:30 till 6 o'clock at night. And if people are going to drop off their kids and then they have something, they have to take them to a doctor, they're not going to wait till the end of the period of the break off of 12 o'clock to come pick up their kid. They have to 11 o'clock appointment, they're going to pick them up at 10:30. We have to face reality. And my hope is that you deny this. And I will add one more thing, is they were given many variations back in 2011 to build this building. And I've spoken to many neighbors, seeing that I've been there for so many years, And the consensus of opinion is, and they don't want to mention it, but it was given to them, it was granted to them because the board did not, or the village did not want to look anti-Semitic. It sounds terrible, but this is what I'm going to tell you. This is what I'm hearing from the neighbors on the block, that their building extends past my home. You're welcome to come past my house anytime, any day of the week, and you will see
Thank you very much.
that if I wanted to put an addition on my house to the lot line, I would not be granted it. My house is blocked out because of that synagogue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope you consider not allowing this.
I will give that a chance to the applicant to answer any questions that he heard, any other comments.
Is there anybody else on this side that would
Oh.
like to speak?
I thought we were all done. Sorry. Sorry.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is John Henrik. I've lived in the home on Thielen Court for 49 years, raised 2 boys, and it has been a very rewarding thing living
Could you
in
give us your
Wilmette.
address, please?
I'm sorry.
205.
205, west side of the street, 7th house from the corner.
Okay.
When they put this synagogue up, and I certainly admire their zeal, but we were blindsided by the size of it versus the size of the lot, and they made 18 variances, which I myself felt I was bamboozled, if that's the proper term, because there is a impact on the entire street. And right now, we do not have, as Sarah Fritz said, she's had 2 accidents up there. I go up there, and all the arborvitaes they put in block the traffic coming from the east going west. And the drop-off is in a single lane of traffic going westbound on Old Glenview Road. In other words, it's been overbuilt. And to compound it by putting more people in, more factors of production, where these people cannot, we're not raising a family for 10 and a half hours a day. And what about the weekends? Are they going to have services and school then? We didn't buy it in a residential area to be overloaded with what's in there now. It's too much. It's like a dinner guest that never leaves. Now they're bringing more in. We made all these exceptions for 18 variances, as I said, and we're back to square one. Now they want more. Can't be done. There's no room for it. We've already overbuilt the neighborhood where I won't get into the flooding because that's a fish of another type, but nobody listens. You know, we're the taxpayer. All I want to do is get legal and equal sharing with what goes on, and it's not that. They're behind us, or on our street, there's parking whenever there's a funeral. They park all the way down our street. I have no argument with their burying of the dead, and I think it's all wonderful things, but it's overstuffed with traffic, and it's a hazard for if we have enough young kids on the street, it's going to have to be something else. You can't accept them putting a daycare in there and then put fences around us. How many more variances do we have? I'm asking you not to even consider letting them be in on the street. And I wish them all the luck, but that's not the place to be doing it. There's no room. We filled the bucket to the top now. Now it's splashing over. It's got to be denied. I hope you'll take our words to heart. I appreciate your time, but this is not the answer, and it's not a good choice. It's not a good neighbor policy either. I wish these people nothing but success in their endeavors, but we didn't approve the synagogue to be built there to begin with, to just bring in some more, and it's going to keep getting more congested, and there's no room. So I thank you for listening to me. I hope I've made my point. I've made my case. Consider it certainly is not a vengeance or anything that I even address this topic, but enough is enough, You just drive down the street before you even think of it and look at it. So look at the size of it. Now you want to put more in there? It's ludicrous. But I thank you for your time, your patience, and
Thank you.
I guess, as they say, I'm done.
Thank you.
Wait, quick question. So would you agree that there is from time to time, a parking issue on Thielen Court?
There's a what? I'm sorry.
Would you agree that there is or would you say that there is a parking issue on Thielen Court from time to time?
Definitely.
Okay.
In fact, they talk of the drop-off. They're dropping off on a lane of traffic going westbound. There is no bypass around it.
But on your street, Thielen Court, that you live on, do you think there's a traffic issue on Thielen Court?
No, there's an issue on Old Glenview Road. That's a one single lane of traffic going by the synagogue for westbound traffic.
Sure.
With the turn lane, there's two going east. And not to, I could cloud the issue of what I'm stating by bringing other things in. It's not the point. But they even did a sewer hookup in Arena Street. We still have two potholes there now that have been there since 2011. It wouldn't do me any good to describe it, and I'm not biased in any way, one way or the other, but I do believe that enough is enough. Just drive over and look. Before you, the pictures don't do justice to what it is. You can look at it and see that the property has been overbuilt. Now you want to bring in 30 kids, and they're going to put a fence around the outside, that even less visibility for traffic. This is a residential neighborhood. This isn't. Almost every other house of worship that does have daycare that I know of up here has a provision for parking. We do not have one there, and if they do have it, then they put a chain across the front that says lot full or no parking. This is not what they agreed to, and it happened in 2011, and we're still talking about it. Now they want to go for another dose. It's wrong. It's just a question of they've overbuilt their enterprise, or whatever you want to call it. Now we're going to have daycare. Is it daycare, or is it babysitting, or what is it? Is it training? I can't answer that. I certainly wish them every success in life, but this is not it. I mean, it doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar. I'm certainly not one, but I don't think the village board has given it the consideration back in 11 that they did, and now it's a skyscraper of measure on the street. People laugh when they say, "Oh, I know the street. That's with that big building on the corner." I said, "Yeah. Look at it. It's completely out of proportion with everything else." And now they want to enlarge it. It doesn't make sense.
Thank you, sir.
So
I do have one question. So when you and the neighbors talk about the parking issue, is it the parking along Old Glenview Road, or is it parking on your
It's
street?
collectively, it is both. We have one neighbor who had to finally, they put no parking signs between her driveway and the corner because it's overbuilt. I mean, it's like turning into a maze, and you don't know which way to go to get out. It's not the place to be putting a school in.
And have you ever had problems backing out of your driveway or getting out of your driveway?
No, I'm down the hill, but getting up to the corner and past the stop sign could be a trick,
Okay, all right.
It's not, it just isn't there. I mean, I know that you people have many things on your mind, many, as they say, fish to fry. But this here, when it started, I was not really for it. I'm not militant. I'm not going to go march or anything like that. But it's common sense. It's just too big. The building is too big, and now they want to exacerbate it by putting in a daycare. Is it a daycare for religious purposes, or is it an enterprise? And they're leaving us. And the weekends, I'm sure, will be filled now with more daycare. They say no, but they've said a lot of things that haven't come to fruition, And this thing with Pizer or Weinstein Chapel across the street where they park there, they've even been told over in the shopping mall their cars will be towed if their mourners come over there. It's too crowded. I mean, it's common sense, but nobody seems to want to address it that way. I don't say we're placating any group or anything. I admire anybody who believes in a higher power and dedicates it, but a daycare isn't going to be making an impact on the children. We could debate this till the next day. I don't want to do that. I just want you to consider the impact on the people that are living there, that have lived there 50 years before these people built this business. It's a beautiful building, but it's like, it doesn't fit. The size doesn't fit. So for them to expand it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
I appreciate your time. I wouldn't have your job. Thanks for everything.
Thank
Just so
you.
you know, it's not a job, we're all volunteers.
Yeah, it's even worse.
Yeah, we volunteer all our time.
I
Have I-
appreciate your time.
Have I missed anyone that wants to speak? Did I swear you, did I swear you in?
Yes.
I did?
My name is Ying Liang. I live on 135 Thielen Court for almost 37 years. The traffic is really heavy for the last 5 years. On the east side of the Thielen Court, there's no parking. So even some of the funeral, when there's a big funeral, people park on the right side. And then on my side, west side is completely taken by parking is full. All the way from the stop sign, second house, all the way to the cul-de-sac. And some of the Wilmette Plaza shopping workers, they park on our side too. So traffic is very heavy. And a couple of times my driveway was blocked. I need to go to the dentist. And I told the person, I said, I need to get out, please.
How many times has your driveway been blocked?
I would say for this year, a couple of times. I did not call the police because of the funeral, and I said, I can wait. But I called my dentist, I've been running late. So,
What, in your opinion, causes the west side of the street to be full of parked cars?
some of the employees from the Wilmette Plaza,
Yes,
they park on the west side of the street
yes.
in front of my driveway. And then sometimes it's very hard for me to get out too. So I have to tell them, hey.
Someone mentioned ahead of you that when there is a large funeral, that the people will park on Thielen Court as well?
Yes.
So do you think, to your knowledge, how significant, how should I say it, the people that use the applicant's center for events, attend those things on Saturdays or Sunday school, do you think they are the most significant issue on the west side for parking purposes?
I did find some of them parked in front of west side, all the way there. They walk towards the Shabbat. So, how?
When, on Sundays and summer school?
Saturdays.
Saturdays?
Yes.
Okay.
And then with the daycare coming up, I think the traffic will be really super busy. And then, like one of my neighbors mentioned, if you have an emergency, to get out to the Skokie Boulevard or the east side, west side, is really tough.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Mr. Henrik, Ms. Raymond, Ms. Fritz, and Mr. Friedman all spoke with the original application, and you didn't. So I'm curious to why it is that you're speaking now as opposed to during the application for the original building. I mean, there may be a very simple, maybe you were busy that day, I don't know, but I'm curious if something has changed or, what the circumstance is that brings you here today and yet you didn't come to the original hearing.
I missed the original hearing because I was at work.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Please, no. You can come up here again if you want. I will allow that, but as soon as this gentleman is finished.
So I hope, this parking situation at the Shabbat, they only have 11 spots. 10 are, and then we are talking about 30 kids in and out. They're not going to get in 2 minutes and get off the parking lot. So obviously they're going to double park on Thielen Court, drop the kids off, so we don't know. That's the assumption we are thinking. So I hope this will be taken seriously for us, for neighbors, not only it's for everybody's welfare.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question? It sounds like it's more of an issue maybe with the funeral home parking longer term, possibly on your street. I have a question for Lisa. I don't know, does the city allow certain areas to have no parking unless you have a permit? Could you do that for that street, and then the people would be forced to park on Glenview Road?
Yes, a neighborhood can put together a petition and request that of the Transportation Commission.
So then probably the only violators would be people that would be there short term. You know, if they did drop off, they'd be gone shortly after that. They wouldn't be there all day long or for hours at a time. You wouldn't be able, the employees from the local shops wouldn't be able to park there. People that are going in the funeral home wouldn't be able to park there. And that sounds like the majority of the parking issues.
Yes, I think the traffic will be busy from 7:30 all the way to 6 in the evening.
Yeah.
Drop off, pickup, drop off, pickup. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
No, wait, are we good? Are we?
I just have one thing to say.
Make it very short, please.
Okay, it's
You've
very
had your
short.
chance.
So, traffic during rush hour, Skokie Boulevard and Glenview Road. Skokie Boulevard gets really backed up, so a lot of people go down Hibbard to Old Glenview to cut off that corner and get onto Skokie Boulevard earlier. So that, in the evenings, that's a big thoroughfare.
So they go west or east
So
on Old
you
Glenview?
cut off the whole corner, they go Hibbard and around to get to the stop sign, so they miss the stoplight at Glenview and Skokie Boulevard. So you get a lot of traffic that way, mostly trucks and people who know that back route.
Well, it sounds like an issue the city might be able to address.
You wanted one more comment?
Signage, maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I just have something very quick just to mention to you, is that because I've lived here for so many years, Weinstein's funeral home was there before I was there, and I have never had a problem with Weinstein's. Like I said, they are very cooperative. I have called them when they have a large funeral to make the announcement in their chapel to announce that if they have any people that are blocking parking roadways, to please mention it to them so that they don't get a ticket. And when you're in a funeral home, you know, you're not thinking of where you're parking. But to be honest with you, in all the years, I have found them to be very cooperative and very nice neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have I missed anyone?
I just have one more comment, please. Thank you. Just want to address one item, and that is parking on Saturday morning or Shabbat for us. I'm at Chabad of Wilmette every Shabbat, every Saturday morning, as are some people here, and I can assure you that those of us that are there every Saturday morning, those of us that drive, 100% park at Weinstein's. If there's an exception, I apologize to our good neighbors, but we're very, very careful to respect our neighbors. And when we leave services, all of us are walking across, those of us that drive, across to Weinstein where we park. Thank you.
Thank you. The second bite at the end.
And I know someone said that, oh, the parents aren't going to run in the rain and the snow, and as the only person here, I think, probably who has children in the Hebrew school, we do. We always park at Weinstein's, and we always run across the street. But I do take into all of the neighbors what you've said about it's not a calm street. I'm not there as frequently as the people who live there. It does sound like maybe it could use a stop sign, and that would alleviate a lot. I don't think you guys are the people to talk to, but it does sound like maybe that there should be a stop sign applied for, and that would alleviate. And also that it would be a good idea to have permitted parking on the street there, like they do in the city, and you put the little sticker in your windshield when you have a guest, and that would alleviate a lot of the problems, whether or not this is approved, which I hope it is. But it sounds like that would make a lot of people a lot happier, no matter what happens here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought you were going to want to speak again. So I think we're done. I would now need to give the...
Before we close, I have one more question for the
No,
the rabbis.
we're not closed.
We're not closing.
We're not closing.
We're going to let the applicant respond to all the
Okay.
issues that he heard and anything else he wants to add and any questions you may have.
Super.
So applicant, please, you heard some issues and questions. Can you respond to those?
Okay, as was discussed, this house of worship was approved and at a public hearing back in 2011. And a house of worship, aside from having its holidays and praying in that, there are classes that are provided for the adults to go to, and there doesn't seem to have been an issue prior. This day school is not going to exasperate the situation. I know that the neighbors have had concerns on Saturday and Sunday and holidays with all the parking. This school will not operate on Saturdays, correct? It will not operate on Sundays. It will not have classes on the Jewish holidays, which may bring in more traffic to the center. So we don't believe that's going to be an issue. So we just feel, and again, you heard from the petitioner that they are really using strong efforts to tell the parents of the children to respect the neighborhood, that I know it could be easy to have a drop-off, that there could be a teacher there to greet the kids to make it easier on the parents, but they're not going that route. They want to be conscientious neighbors, and they want to be able, say, hey, parent, if you're going to be part of this daycare center, that you have to take the necessary steps to park at the area where Pizer Weinstein is and to walk your kid. And I know it's a very friendly pedestrian area where the walking to the class, to the sanctuary is easy to do. So that's pretty much it. I know you wanted to maybe add, I know there was the traffic.
So I took a bunch of notes of what people said and tried to highlight or digest it into the main points. And I can't speak to issues, in terms of weekends and if there's overflow parking. Our scope was to focus on weekdays and during the periods when the preschool would be dropping off, parents would be dropping off and picking up students. So there were some comments about the levels of traffic and while traffic counts were done as part of this analysis. When we originally scoped out the project with city staff or village staff, we took the approach of observations and noting how long queues were, whether people were crossing the street mid-block or at the intersection, things like that. And during the times that coincide with the morning drop-off, the midday and the afternoon pickups, the maximum eastbound queue that we observed on Old Glenview Road at Skokie was 2 to 4 vehicles, depending on which time you saw. And in none of those cases does the queue spill back to the driveway that we're concerned about. There was some conversation about the hours and everyone, coming at 7:30 when it's, rush hour in the morning or 6 p.m. in the evening. The 7:30 to 9 o'clock time is kind of a rolling early start, so people can come at 7:30 or 7:45 or 8, but at 9 o'clock, or if it's 8:30 now, that is when it starts and everyone is in there by. 6 o'clock is the end, so 3 o'clock is the regular full day end of their session, and then from 3 to 6, if you choose to have your student in the after school, daycare portion, some parents are picking up at 3 o'clock, and then if you choose to, pay extra and have that extra care because of your work schedule, that you could be picking up at 3:15, at 4 o'clock, at 4:15. So it's spread out. It's not that everyone's coming at any, specific time. And then I think when there's some confusion, the plan is not to have people pick up and drop off on Old Glenview Road in front of the center. It is not to pull up and use Thalen Court for picking up and parking and running in. We devised phase 1 and phase 2 recommendations of how the plan should work. If it's not following that plan, that's not a plan we support. And I think they've agreed, having parents drive up and down Thalen and parking, that's not a plan that we would support. We would agree that's not a solution to handling pickup and drop off. So using the on-site parking lot and using the overflow parking across the street later in phase 2, should the enrollment grow to 2 classrooms, that's what we would support. Any other
I have a
any other
question
questions
for
on
you.
that? Yeah.
You've been in front of our committee many, many times.
Sure.
For many, many schools
Right.
and churches, synagogues, everything.
They're all starting to sound the same, right?
I was just curious, what is your feeling on this one compared to others?
Yeah.
I know there's, Loyola was a very complex one.
Sure. I mean, Loyola is and St. Francis Xavier. Those are larger
Yeah.
groups and institutions.
Well, we did have
with
that
one
on
with
Forest and.
sure
Wilmette
our
Avenue.
place.
Yeah.
Sure. And so this is we're talking 16 students, and so if you have roughly half are morning session folks, so you have 8 cars coming in and 8 cars leaving around that time to pick up around the noon hour. So you only have about 8 students left in the afternoon. Some are getting picked up at 3, some are getting picked up sometime between 3 and 6. It really starts to spread the load. And when you're talking about only 8 more students to pick up, it's a pretty nominal amount of traffic. It's why we think it can be handled in that single lot or, if needed, right across the street. But those aren't volumes that I would get worried about. I think some of the issues I've heard about are more about speeding or line of sight issues. I know the gentleman mentioned how, I think on the west side of Thalen, at one point the parking went a little bit closer to Old Glenview Road, and since then the distance was pulled back because people were it was parking too close to the street, so you need to be able to do that. So those are some of the things that I've heard more about. It's more about maybe existing speeding or cut-through type of issues, not necessarily if you were to have 8 cars come in and 8 cars leaving, it's a pretty nominal over the course of an hour or the period when they're picking up. It's not something that as a traffic engineer, it's not something that I would be concerned about. Versus, I think that's the big difference. The scale of some of these other schools have much larger enrollments and things like that. So.
And your, I don't know the exact term, but your sense of error in your calculations.
Sure. I mean, well, so if we said 16 students with the initial enrollment, and we had half participating in the morning session and half participating in a full day, and then of the full day, we assumed half would be picked up at 3, and the other half would be picked up sometime between 3 and 6 and partake in the post, the post regular session period. So, if it were to vary 1 or 2 or 3, we're still dealing with low numbers here. This isn't. I'm trying to think of the other preschool that used to be over by Avoca off of Illinois and then relocated west of 94. Yeah. I can't remember the name, but it was a much larger, and they had the loop in front of the old school where people picked up, and then they overflowed into the adjacent lot. There we were talking about dozens and dozens of students. Here we're talking, 1 classroom or 2. It's really not a significant number. However, the parking lot isn't big, so that was the question. We wanted to make sure that the parking lot could handle it in the first phase. In the second phase, we recommended having that offsite option. But still, we're not dealing with a big number. I don't think from a traffic.
16 is the initial, but
yeah,
but
and then if it goes
the goal
to 30
is
again, yeah,
to
double that.
Basically, almost double, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With 4,
and even
and
then,
also double the staff from 2 to 4.
Right,
right.
2 to 4. And then there's a midday staff that deals with meal.
The lunch, so 30,
yeah.
35.
And they've agreed to have somebody outside for if they go to the second classroom to direct traffic a little if there was an issue.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, just so we don't have people trying to pull into a lot that has 8 spaces if they're all full. We don't need someone trying to pull in, looking for a space, and then not being able to maneuver out. Right?
Or, waiting for the space to open up.
Yeah, and I don't think, and that's not another. Yeah, we don't want people sitting there waiting. We want them off. Right. That area in front of the site on Old Glenview Road, you don't want to be blocking of traffic, and that's why I just wanted to clarify that's not the plan. And if it was, that's not something we would support.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just one other comment, too. I just wanted to add that we have the Phase 1 and the Phase 2, and there is really not a risk of it getting any larger, because if it did, it would need to have approval from DCFS, and then there are certain requirements that there would have to be for the outdoor area. So the the House of Worship doesn't believe that it's going to go beyond the two stages that they presented here, and if it did, they would need approval from DCFS on that. And the
So,
rabbi...
just to confirm, you do not intend to increase, you commit that you will
Right.
not increase the student population above 30.
Right.
Is that correct?
Just to clarify, the square footage of our building would not ever allow, according to DCFS requirements, to hold more than 2 classes. So even if we wanted, even if we were bursting at our seams.
You should come up to the microphone.
Sorry, I misstated on
No,
that,
that's-
so I'm glad.
The interior square footage of our classrooms, they've already come to the site and inspected. We have another inspection next month. It wouldn't allow more than 2 classrooms. So even if we were bursting, even in that situation, we would not be able to.
I'm just, we had an interesting experience with Loyola, so this is a different issue, but
Not aware of that. And just one more comment about the trees along Thielen Court. We put up those trees at the requirement or the request of the village, not intending to block any site. So if that is happening, then we're happy to explore that. But that was not our intent. It was to block the views so that they don't have to look at a parking lot.
I remember one of the trustees, in fact, in that earlier meeting, did ask, what are you going to do to shield?
That was put up as a shield.
The west side of the
Yeah.
building.
Can I ask you a quick question about your pickup and drop-off procedure acknowledgement agreement?
Yes.
It states, the first bullet, drop-off will begin at 8:25 a.m. There's no supervision before then. So if you have early drop-off, there's got to be some supervision, right?
That person's not qualified to be a teacher and to have the staff that'll be there at 8:30, from 7 o'clock to 8:30 is just someone that'll be like playing with the kids. It's just to accommodate the parents. The person's not qualified or trained.
Sort of babysitting as opposed to
It's
teaching.
a glorified babysitting, yes.
That is
But the-
supervision, isn't it?
Correct.
Or
but
is it not supervision?
It's supervision. They wouldn't be qualified to have those kids under their care. I guess if a parent dropped off their kid and ran away, they would be supervised by that person, but there's no, yeah. So
Isn't that what the parents are doing? They're dropping them off early because they have to go to work or whatever?
no, the people that are signed up for pre-care would be allowed to have their kids supervised by that teacher. It's not a teacher, it's a babysitter.
Okay.
Before then, at 8:30, that person will not allow that the parent can't say, "Oh, I'm here early." It's a different staff. It's a different program. It's a totally different arrangement.
So is there a different form for those people to sign?
No, because those people will be. It's not a service that we offer to the entire community. It's for parents of the school that are dropping their kids off early. The staff member will be a different staff member. The program will be a different program.
So they don't flow into the regular program later at 8:30?
They do. There's the program, good morning, everyone,
I'm
welcome.
confused because this says before 8, or insinuates before 8:25 there's no supervision, but there is.
Technically, yes, there is.
Okay,
So
that's why
if the
I'm
language
just
has to change,
confused.
it's fine, but,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
So to close, we're respectfully requesting that the Zoning Board of Appeals grant the approval of the request made by the petitioner this evening. And we did review the staff report with the conditions set forth therein, and the petitioner is agreeable to the conditions set forth.
Are you familiar with the conditions by the land, what do you call it? The
Site Plan Review Committee.
Site Plan Review Committee?
Not specifically that.
They were not made aware of it?
It's in the report. It's
Yeah.
basically the recommendations.
But
for
right,
the-
we
yeah.
reviewed all that, yeah, so we're fine
Okay.
with that.
And you know that if this were to be approved, it would be subject to the conditions required by the Site Plan Review
Right,
Committee.
that committee, right.
Thank you. Okay, and any other comments from the applicant? And if not, I will close testimony. And hopefully somebody will have a motion. Mr. Boyer.
All right. For purposes of discussion, In regards to case number 2019-Z28, I move to recommend granting or approval for a request for an extension of a special use for a place of worship to permit the operation of a child daycare center at 2904 Old Glenview Road in accordance with the plan submitted and conditioned upon the site plan review committee comments of this report. The use shall run with the use.
Second?
Second.
Has been moved and seconded. Ready to discuss?
Sure. All right, I would love to hear what everybody has to say on this. The way I see it, there's a ton of moving parts and conditions for the plan for parking, for movement of parents and children. Initially, when we looked at this in 2011, there was a number of variance requests for the building. And pretty much everybody that was discussing it at the time had the concerns about the parking for the operation of the applicant's place of worship at that time. There was a concern that 60 parking space variance was a very aggressive ask. So now we're looking at an additional use, higher intensity of use. Arguably, is it 15 kids, is it 17, 20, 30? At the point of this is, at that time, there was concerns about the parking of the use then. Now there's an additional use being put on there, additional strains, higher intensity of use. I'm not entirely sure that it meets all the standards of review. I have concerns with B, C, and possibly E. B being the establishment, maintenance operation of the proposed use in this physical location will not be detrimental, to the public health, safety, and welfare. C being the proposed use in this physical location will not be injurious to the use, enjoyment of other property in the neighborhood. So there's, I definitely have some concerns with the special use standards. I have concerns with the parking as it was in 2011, and now the additional traffic flow and parking issues. And last thing I'll say, and I'll probably bring up some other questions, but one question I wrote down is what happens if Weinstein closes?
There is one of the conditions of the site, if you look at page, the conditions of the site plan review committee states clearly that if the parking agreement shall remain in effect at all times that the daycare, they call it daycare, is in operation. If at any time the use of the funeral home parking lot, as detailed in the Kimley Home Report, is no longer available, the daycare use must cease operations. And that is a condition we're putting on it.
Okay. Well, but for that, my other concerns are cited, so I'd love to hear what everybody else has to say.
So back in 2011, I voted against this because I thought anything that needed 17 or 18 variances shouldn't be approved. The building, you built a great building, and I think, the basic tenet of having a daycare or a Montessori school in, the synagogue is fine. The problem is you're stuck in a tight place with, small streets and lots of traffic, and neighbors who felt they kind of got the short end of the stick 8 years ago, and are complaining about parking. And it sounds to me like it's not all synagogue related. There's other people from the strip center and what have you. This is really not unlike the Our House variances that were being sought, and the neighbors had many of the same types of issues you did there. It was alleys being blocked by pace buses, and one of the things we tried to come up with during that case was, we had talked about doing some type of a trial for 6 months to see if it worked. I mean, because I agree with Mike that I think there are issues with the standards of review and with the special use issues, particularly as it relates to ingress and egress. And I know you're going to have a person there, and if that works, that's great. We've had other school situations where they said they would do it, and the neighbor said it really wasn't working, or they weren't out there all the time. And at any rate, so we had spent a lot of time talking about that. It never went anywhere. I thought it was a really good idea. I think it would be a really good idea for this situation. On balance, I can't support this because I do believe there are issues with the special use standards and the standards of review, and so I think that the village board needs to weigh in on this.
Any other comments for discussion here?
I'm on the fence as well on this one. I respect the work that Kimley Horn does all the time and respect what they say and the impact that the Montessori school may have. I was not on the board at the time when Mr. Boyer and Colling were on the board. So it's difficult. I'm concerned about, if Weinstein was to close and that was redeveloped as some other corner, retail corner. But I feel more comfortable now that you read that. Yeah, it's tough. I don't know if it really meets the standards as well. And I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great program, everything else, but I'd like to hear what other people have to say as well. It's a difficult one. So with John, I had a question for you. So did they ever do that program, the 6-month thing?
No.
What happened with that?
That was something we had
project,
talked
Lisa?
about.
I did ask, in fact, I asked Lisa before the meeting as to, I recall that they had some time, they were going to get together. This is the, and were there a lot of complaints still that we hear?
I hadn't heard of anything lately, but Mr. Lemon actually was involved in that, and if you wanted to ask him, I'm sure he could give you an update.
I think the board did approve it, though.
Oh, yeah, right.
The board did
Yeah.
approve the variances, and
We did.
the special use for, yeah, right. Yeah.
Mr. Pelleton?
I just
Go
had
ahead,
one
sorry.
other thing to ask. It's every time these issues come up, they always relate to a busy street somewhere. So, for me, I look at it and say, well, you bought a place near a busy street. You bought your home near Skokie Boulevard, which is a very busy street. I used to be on the Plan Commission, and somebody complained how noisy it was for Eden's Highway, and she said, I've lived here 39 years, and look at this picture, and the picture was the day that it was built, and you could see, for a quarter mile, and there were only 2 cars, one going each direction. So it's a difficult thing, because when you buy near, for that other location was Wilmette Avenue. So, how much of the traffic is attributed to the school, and how much is attributed just because you're near a busy intersection?
Well, I think that's part of it, and
And this
I have to say it-
this is addressing the residents' issues.
yeah, but I just want to maybe segue and say I too am on the fence on this. I do feel like there's a whole lot being, it's a small lot. Your building takes up most of the lot. There's not that much parking, and you're adding more intensity. And that was a similar problem at the other, that other, what is it
Our
called?
Place.
Our Place at the other church, and it's not unusual, but I just feel like we're often being asked to permit too much on too small of a site.
Well, I have a lot of conflicting thoughts, I guess, about it. And one is my parents owned a Montessori school for 32 years, so I'm, steeped in that whole program. And I live next to one now. So I'm aware of how they work. And I appreciate what goes on there. I went to Montessori school myself. So I think it's very valuable, and I like and agree with the righteous and ethical and moral education that component that would go in accompaniment with the Montessori teachings. I was a little surprised when I looked back at the original application that there were 17 or 18 variances granted for one project, and that while the zoning ordinance required 69 parking spaces, one of the variances that was granted was for 60 parking spaces. That's quite a bit short. And the funeral home has 80 spaces available. So even though we have heard about what the flow is during the day in terms of the number of cars at any one time, it seems like we're definitely the increased density of usage, the increased intensity of use, I don't know which one is the right word, is going to expand that balloon still further. And I don't know what the breaking point is. I know for some of the residents, they've already reached that. And so that concerns me. I like the use. I agree with the use and the value of the use. I just don't know if the site and the area is able to take additional traffic to the extent that is envisioned. And it could be just a little bit more traffic. But a little bit more traffic, if you're, you have somebody who's trying to pull into that parking lot and the parking lot is full and they're sitting there and waiting, that causes a traffic jam. And I don't know that we should grant a variance necessarily with the idea that the village police will sort it out later on.
I just have, I hear all of the comments and concerns, and we've heard from the neighbors as well as the applicant. With regards to traffic, I keep thinking that the use that they are adding doesn't overlap with any of the other functions. So there's no overlap that I can tell. So it should, in theory, not impose greater intensity. And the parking lot across, but going back to the beginning, and I was also not there in 2011, the 17 variants, most of them, I think maybe 15 out of the 17, were due to the fact that one half of the lot is zoned R1 residential. So anything that they did, and the other half is zoned neighborhood retail. So anything they did of a quote commercial or institutional nature on a lot zoned R1 would creates a great number of variances. And that's what happened then. At the time, I don't know how I would have voted had I been there. But now that it exists, the uses do not overlap. We've heard from the traffic consultant. They have an agreement with the funeral home, which if that ceases to operate or another use succeeds that land, they are committed to eliminate the Montessori school, and we hope that doesn't happen. So, one more point, the pedestrian crossing from the funeral home, as indicated by the consultant, is critical. There must be clear signage, and that cars must stop if there are pedestrians present, because that could be of some concern. So I've heard the neighbors, I don't think this should, because the uses do not overlap. This should not impose additional burden on the neighborhood. That's not my view. So all in all, I am inclined to support this.
Just so that everybody's clear, our role is to interpret this and compare it to the code. The village is the one that makes that final decision. They're the elected officials, we're just volunteers, so we're basing it on the codes. Or, I know, John, you've got a better way to say it, I mean.
Well, the standards.
Huh?
The standards for special
Yeah,
use. and-
standards are-
Right,
yeah.
standards of review.
Any more comments amongst the board members? So are we ready to vote?
Yep.
I guess we are.
Mr. Boyer?
No.
Mr. Colang?
No.
Ms. Norick?
No.
Mr. Pelletin?
I'm going to say regretfully no.
Mr. Sturman?
Yes.
Chairman Schneider?
Yes. So this comes with a negative recommendation to the Board of Trustees, who will meet
September 10th.
September 10th. As I mentioned earlier, you will need 5 of the 7 trustees to override this negative recommendation. I'm sure you will be there and make your case as you did 8 years ago successfully, and wish you all the best. And thank you. And if somebody needs to come up from the applicant side to sign.
I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the Zoning Board of Appeals for case number 2019 Z29.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Or it's 3-3 then.
Yeah, you need 4 just to be affirmative.
No, that's it.
So it's still a
Oh. Yeah, there is.
last minute. I was,
Excuse me a second.
I kind of listened to what Brian
Is there 3
I
minutes?
forget the program.
Maybe
We were off last week.
Yeah.
We're motion to adjourn.
At some
No,
point,
we're just telling we're adjourned.
We're adjourned.
and that's what I was saying. I mean, I heard what he said, and I